If you've been flying FPV for a while, you probably have that one trick. And by that one trick, I mean the one that you just can't seem to do. Everybody's got one. Everybody's got the one trick. I have two, and I can do them. But I'm going to tell you how I learned how to do them. And my two tricks are trippy spins and matty flips. But if you have been flying for a little bit and you know how to move your quad around like you should, and you've been working on some tricks, everybody's got that subset of tricks, one or more, that they aren't very good at. And the best way to learn how to do those tricks and not spend a fortune doing it is in a simulator. But simulators suck at mimicking real-life quads. Today I'm going to show you how I set up my simulator, in this case it will be Velocidrone, to feel as close to my real 5-inch drones as possible. Hey everybody, I am Big Ninja, and today we are going to take a look at Velocidrone and how to make a 5-inch freestyle quad feel as much like a real 5-inch freestyle quad as we can in the simulator. If you've been playing simulators for a while, which if you're an FPV, you really should be using a simulator, whether you learn in a simulator or you're just learning tricks in a simulator like I talked about, you should be using something. And Velocidrone is a very popular simulator that runs on a lot of computers, whether they are high-end, lots of graphics processing power, or low-end. Velocidrone tends to work pretty well. So a lot of people have it, but the physics just aren't the same as real life. And that makes learning complicated tricks really tough. Whenever it doesn't feel like the drone and you learn it in the simulator, then you go do it with the drone and it just feels totally different, and you feel like, what was the point of taking all of that time to learn things in a simulator if it's not going to translate to what I'm doing in real life? Well, today we're going to take a look at a few aspects of what I do to make the simulator feel as good as it can. It's still not perfect, but up to standards for what I practice with to learn tricks. And the things that we're going to be taking a look at that make a drone in the simulator feel like real life are fling, thrust, and floatiness. Those are the three things in a simulator that really just make it feel wrong. Most simulators are too floaty. Velocidrone is very floaty, and by floaty I mean that when you raise the throttle and say you blip the throttle up, the drone doesn't seem to fall correctly. It feels like it just hangs there forever. You have unlimited hang time, and that is not true to life. Gravity does not work that way. As far as fling goes, most of the time a simulator does not feel like a real quad weight. You know, that you can't throw the weight around like you can in a real quad. And thrust, that's debatable. It depends on some settings that I'll show you here in a minute. But the thrust does play into how much you get when you flick the throttle before you start to think about how floaty it feels. Now in a minute we're going to go to the computer and I am going to show you the settings I'm using and how to adjust them for your personal feel to make it feel like your drone as much as you can. But there are a few important things that we need to cover before we head over to the computer that are also really important to how your simulator is going to feel. And the first one has to do with your radio. I fly the TX16S with the AGO1 gimbals because I'm fancy like Applebee's, but you know, even if you don't, if you just have a beta FPV radio or something like that, there are some things that you can do to make it feel better as far as tactile and as far as the performance is concerned with your simulator. If you are running something like me that runs OpenTX, I recommend that you switch to EdgeTX because the mixer inside of EdgeTX that reads the sticks and then processes it to be sent to your computer can operate a lot faster. Well, not necessarily just faster. It's more about the jitter, the variance in the amount of time it takes for a packet to be transferred over USB to the computer. EdgeTX is a little bit better at that and gives you better consistency. And the less latency you have in your control link, just like in real life, the less it's going to feel floaty. Honestly, that latency translates into floatiness and delay, and you wonder why you hit things that you would never hit in real life in a simulator. So if you're running something that currently can run OpenTX, you might consider switching to EdgeTX to get that little bit of a performance boost. And if you're running either EdgeTX or OpenTX, like I am, and you're running a module, or even the built-in multi-module if you have one in your radio, it would be best to set up a profile on your radio, kind of similar to the one you fly your real quad with. Just copy it and then name it simulator, and then go in there and turn off the internal and external module bays. So you have no modules running while you're running your simulator. The battery lasts a little bit longer and you don't hear fan noise from your module or anything like that, but I like to do that to keep it as simple as possible. And I copy the one that I use for my everyday drone into the simulator one so that my switches are the same, because I want to set up the same switches in my simulator as I have on my radio. So those are a couple physical things that I recommend with your radio. There are a couple other things that we need to think about too. One of them is the actual latency of the game on your PC. So you need to think about the specs of your computer and some times you've been playing the game and maybe notice the frame rate drop. That does happen. There are some settings in there you can adjust for the graphics quality and the draw distance. You may want to mess with those until you don't have frame rate problems. Because again, frame rate drops are going to feel like video latency in your real quad. It's going to affect your ability to react. You're going to hit things and things are not going to feel the same as when you're flying. So take these things into consideration before we move on to the actual settings, because they are just as important, if not more important, than the settings themselves. The last one we're going to talk about is actually the posture and ergonomics of how you're flying in front of your simulator. I stand to fly, so it's kind of hard for me. I'm not going to stand to fly in a simulator, but I do wear my neck strap for my radio when I'm simming, and I wear it at the same length. And what I normally do is I lean up a little bit so that my radio hangs down like it would if I were standing, and it gives me the same feel where my wrists are on the sticks, so that the muscle memory I build on the same sticks that I fly my real quads with is going to be better able to translate after I'm out of the simulator and in the real world. So those are just a few things. Again, they are pretty important. If you aren't considering them now, you might think about considering them and see how things go. But just as important are the settings on the computer. So we're going to hop over to the computer real quick. I'm going to show you my settings, and then I'm going to show you what a quad looks like without those settings, what a quad looks like with those settings, and how to adjust them to your preferences and your quad setups. We are going to be focusing on 5-inch freestyle in the 650 to 750 gram 5-inch range. I'll show you some variances for different prop pitch, things like maybe a little bit of weight difference, because not everybody's real life drone is the same. So if you just run what I have, it may not feel to you like your real drone. So I'm going to show you how I found my variances, so maybe you can find your own or tweak mine a little bit until they're just what you need. And if this video has been helpful so far, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing to the channel. If I've earned your subscription by giving you some information here, I'd really appreciate it. And if not, that's fine. I'm going to keep giving you the information, and maybe someday you'll feel like doing that. All right, let's hop on over to the computer. I'm going to start at Velocidrone, and we're going to cover my settings first. So this is the freestyle quad that I actually recommend in Velocidrone, because I find that it's most like a 5-inch freestyle quad as far as being true X and having some of the characteristics. Velocidrone doesn't necessarily like count all the physics based on the style of drone you're flying, but the Nazgul is a pretty standard frame. So I picked the Nazgul for my freestyle rig here. We're going to go ahead and go into the settings. And these are the settings that I use for my Nazgul. If you want to, you can go ahead and just pause the video right here and put these in your simulator and try them if you want. But I'm just going to run through them real quick and tell you why I have them the way that I have them. I haven't messed with the drag on the front, top, and side at all. I have messed with the frame lift, downforce. You'll notice that's at 110%. And what that's actually doing is causing the quad to be less floaty. I'm making the downforce of the quad a little bit more. I'm making the effective gravity a little heavier. So the float goes away just a little bit. On the propeller size, I'm actually running, I think this is, the smallest 5-inch prop you can run is a 50-40. I actually run a 51-36 in real life, but there's so much thrust that contributes to the float on these quads in Velocidrone that I just went with the smallest 5-inch. If I go down to a 40-45, which is the next size, it's too little thrust. It just changes the characteristics too much. So 50-40 was my sweet spot that I found. The prop power, I run a 6S drone at 1800 kV and about 710 grams. So this is where the weight starts to play into the floatiness a little bit. I'm running 70% prop power, so a little bit less than what I would be getting at 100%, obviously. But if you remember, I'm also running a little bit bigger props than I do in real life. So this is about the prop power that I get out of a 5136 at 70% here. I haven't messed with the prop wash at all. I just left that at 20%. Propeller profile 1. To be honest with you, I'm not sure what the different propeller profiles do, but I'm going with prop 1 because that's how I set it all up. I did not touch that one. The quad weight. I set the quad weight for this Nazgul at 125% because, again, it feels a little bit floaty. So it contributes with the downforce here, a little bit of additional weight, which is your fling. If you feel like you need more fling, the quad weight is where that would come into play. So I found 125 is about where I want it to be for a 710 to 730 gram drone. I fly at 15 degrees. Everybody asks me that all the time. They ask me about the camera angle, and the definitive answer here, 15 degrees. That's what I fly all my freestyle at. I never use camera mix angle. You definitely want air mode. I don't care for battery simulation. I don't care for battery simulation in freestyle practice, so just turn that sucker right off. Battery mass effect, 100%. Definitely want the battery mass. Just leave that on there. And I do run a GoPro 9 as the onboard video camera, and I still need 125% on the quad weight, even with a GoPro 9 on here. So this is my setup, the way I have it. Take it for what you will. If you want to go try it just like this, go for it. But we're going to continue on, and I'm going to show you what the Nazgul flies like without these settings. One little note here, if you're watching this video and you have only ever been in a simulator, perfectly fine. Just everything that I've said so far is still applicable to you. It's a little harder for you to have copied a profile if you don't have a drone in real life, but you know, to each their own. If you don't have one yet, just use whatever profile works for you on your radio. But you can take the settings that I just showed you and plug them into your own Nazgul and Velocidrone, and I think it performs well. I'm going to show you in a minute after I show you the stock Nazgul, how the one with my settings fly, and then we're going to tweak some things in real time, and I'll show you. But if you don't have a basis for how a drone should fly, it's going to be really hard for you to make those settings changes. So it's perfectly fine to just take my settings and go plug them in and use them, if that's what you need to do. Okay, back to the computer. We're going to go fly the Nazgul completely stock, so you can see what that looks like. All right, so I just made a bone stock copy of the Nazgul so we can mess with it, and I got my stick overlay on down here. I do have my rates entered into this profile, but look at when I go low throttle, look how far I float for. I'm just like, take a break, get a cup of coffee, and wait for the drone to come down. It's super duper floaty. See how floaty that sucker is. As far as the power goes, so the thrust component we talked about, it has a lot. And the Nazgul, like real freestyle quads on 6S, they're not lightweights when it comes to thrust. So, I mean, it's a little more than I would say is realistic. Again, we're trying to go for some realism here. And flingability, and let's check some flingability. So I'm gonna just juicy flick this shipping container. Now I know in real life, I mean, I might have pulled that juicy flick the same distance right there. Man, it's so floaty. But I'm going pretty quick here. And I didn't go very far. I mean, I made it, I think I ended my juicy flick somewhere like right here. Well, right here. Back up a little bit. So when I turned around, I was about here. Which, you know, it's okay. The flingability is not horrible. But now what I'm going to do is we're going to go through all the settings that I use to modify how the quad feels, one at a time, and I'm going to show you what the difference is that they make and tell you how you can kind of get it where you want it. So let me land real quick, and then we're going to pull up the menu and start looking at that. So this is the completely stock settings for the Nazgul. And if you remember right, the first thing that I do is I adjust the lift downforce. So I want to put that to 120. Let me show you, this is the furthest it goes. This is 120. And then we're going to set my prop size to the smallest 5-inch 50-40. So This is at 120% lift downforce. Again, I don't fly at 120%, I fly at 110. I just want to show you what this does. So it helps the float a little bit. It helps the power feel a little bit better. It still floats pretty good, but we haven't messed with weight yet. It's really a combination of things, the weight and the lift downforce that help, but it's still pretty floaty. So not perfect. It's a little bit better. I mean, it still floats like crazy. So let's land again and let's mess with the next setting. I'm going to put this back down to 110. We're going to mess with that later. I'll show you what it does when we get there. The propeller power, we're going to take down to 70% because that's what I have it on for mine, and prop profile 1 because I found that to just be the one that I like the most. All right, so let's see what that feels like. Again, we haven't messed with the weight yet, but you know, it's still pretty floaty. It's not as bad. It's pretty bad though. It's pretty bad. But as far as the thrust of the quad, the thrust feels about right, is what I'm used to. It's a little bit less than what the stock is, and it's not as immediate. The thrust isn't as immediately on as it is in the bone stock Nazgul, which is kind of what a real quad feels like. I mean, the thrust is always there, obviously, but you don't just go from, you know, right here to all the way up here immediately. It doesn't work that way. So this helps the thrust to be just a little bit more realistic with the settings we've given it so far. All right, let's land and then make some more settings changes. Oh, I should have changed this before. I'm going to put this back down to 15 degrees. I was flying at 35. The quad weight. We're going to mess with the weight now. So the quad weight that I normally use is 125%. Now we're going to spend a minute on this one because I think it's going to make a little bit of difference for the floatiness that you'll be able to see. So look, that quad flops down to the ground now, and I have it auto crash on, so it detects it. But whenever I let go, it doesn't float for a year. I mean, it floats a little, but we're not quite all the way there yet. But the weight helps with the thrust downforce, helps make it feel a little bit more realistic. And it's not nearly as floaty as it was a minute ago. I mean, it still floats. In air mode, you're going to float a little bit, but gravity is doing a thing now. And we still don't have the battery mass effect on, so let's go mess with some more settings there. All right, no camera mix angle. We want air mode. Battery emulation false, we don't want any of that, but we do want 100% battery mass effect. And by default, this is using a 1300 mAh battery. So these are the settings that I recommended to you earlier, other than I had a little bit of prop wash in mine. You don't have to. But these are the settings that I had set up on mine. So let's fly like that, and then I want to show you some variances. So it doesn't float forever. I mean, it still floats, and I can fling. Let's go do that juicy flick over this shipping container. All right. Let's juicy flick over this thing and see how far we go. I kind of backed into it there. Let's try that again. I didn't like that juicy flick. Let's go do another one. See how the fling works, because now we have the full battery mass effect and we have 125% on the quad weight. Yeah, so I came out over here this time, which is a little bit further. I mean, it's not a huge difference in how the quad feels, but it's just enough to get it a little closer to realistic with the quads that I fly. And again, I am flying a 710 gram freestyle 6S rig with 1800 kV motors, and I fly big honking motors. I fly 2208s. I love my iFlight Zings. They're so good. But anyway, this is how I fly and how it feels for me when I fly. It just comes naturally. My fingers want to do this stuff, and the way I have this quad set up doesn't hold me back from what my fingers want to do. Where it does if I'm using a stock loadout. My fingers get kind of confused. So this is pretty darn close as I've been able to get with Velocidrone. But let me show you again. Like I said, we're going to spend some time on the other settings and show you how they play in now that we've got all the settings in place. So the first one we're going to mess with is lift downforce. I'm going to put that up to 120% again. So this ought to inhibit a little bit of lift, and you'll notice the quad flops down a little bit more too. We have a little weight so we can get some distance in our flop, and the lift just feels strained now. At 120%, I've got to be on the throttle for a while to get up high. It doesn't pop. Look, I can do throttle pops and it doesn't really pop. So that's kind of a dampener for the lift. You know, that's why 110% I think is a good place. Depending on your quad, if you run much lower pitch props, you might find that 120 is where you want to be. But you know, I run 5136 and 110 is good there. Now let's mess with the quad weight as well. So I'm going to put it up to 150. It's a pretty dramatic change. Let's make this quad super heavy. It just plunks down. And again, our thrust is a little bit dampened by the downforce that we messed with a minute ago. But yeah, the floatiness of the quad, it's definitely a chunky monkey now. It doesn't want to go anywhere. It's a real, I have to really force it to go where I want it to go, because the weight is throwing it around quite a bit. So this is too heavy. This would be something like, if you're running an 800 gram quad or something higher than 800 grams, and your motors are constantly in a state of struggling, then yeah, this might be where you want to be. If that's the kind of thing you like, if you like a supreme amount of flingability. In fact, let's go fling this thing on a juicy flick. But I mean, I'm hovering this quad at like 50% throttle. Seriously. So it's a chunky dude right now. Yeah, so I'll try another one this way. Yeah, I mean, it throws me quite a ways. And I'm having to, yeah, there we go. It throws me quite a ways. I don't know, it just feels really wrong having that much weight on the quad. So I'm gonna go back to 125% on this again, because that's where I like it to be. So this is my setup. It's what I like, but you can mess with the downforce. You can mess with the weight. You can mess with the prop thrust. So that's one thing. Let me show you what the prop thrust does, because it does have a gigantic impact. So let's take this down to like 50% prop thrust, which would be really low. It's the smallest you can go. The quad doesn't want to go anywhere. Look, I'm full throttled, and I get no lift. Like I can just keep it at full throttle and fly it. Never have to take your finger off the throttle. So the thrust, the prop thrust, is a really big difference when you get to messing with it. I don't recommend that you go too low, because then you're going to feel like your quad weighs a lot, but it's not going to affect the flingability, and that's not going to be realistic either. So like I said, for my 5136s, I run 70% on my thrust here. And this feels like my Manta build that I fly in real life, which is why I can just talk to you and not think about it and run into that. I can talk to you and fly and not have too much trouble, because my fingers are just doing what they do. I don't have to think about it hardly at all. It just happens for my fingers, because it feels like my quad does. And I spend so much time flying my Manta that I know exactly how it feels, and my fingers know what to do, which is really nice. And then if you want to work on tricks, like you just saw, I did a trippy spin there, and then I'll do a Matty over here, because I have been working on my Matties in the simulators. You just got to find a good spot in real life. I think I'm going to have one pretty soon. The place where I fly has some construction, and the bando is going to be a Brando before too long, and they're going to put up some metal girders, and I think it's going to be the perfect Matty opportunity, hopefully. But yeah, let's work on my Matty flips, and this ought to translate pretty close to my Manta in real life. So there you go. I'm going to pull up those settings one more time if you didn't catch them. Again, you can just copy them however you want, but we'll run through one more time. The lift downforce is a dampening for the lift. If you don't want the lift immediately, the lift downforce will help you there, and 110% is what I like. Propeller size, I'm running 5136s, and the 5040 is the size that I like. It is the smallest 5-inch they have. The propeller power, because I'm running a little lower than 5040, I've got on 70%. If you have higher pitch props and you want more thrust, you can go 100 or even more. prop profile 1, prop wash, at your own discretion, whatever you'd like. The quad weight, I'm running a 710 to 720 gram quad, and 125% on this Nazgul feels right to me. Camera angle, obviously that is all your choice. Battery emulation, never do it on a freestyle quad, pointless. Battery mass effect, you want 100% there, and it comes with a GoPro 9, so fly GoPro 9 on it. Is there anything else? You can do an 8. Do the 9 because it's heavy. You might as well fly the heavy camera. And that's it. I hope it wasn't too confusing. Simulator physics are very different than real world physics, and this is just stuff that I have found by tweaking a little bit until I got what I liked. Now I do fly races in the simulator, in this one in particular, and my quads are set up very different for racing. I do tiny whoop racing and I do 5-inch racing, and these are not settings you should be using for those scenarios. This is a 710 gram freestyle quad on 6S with 1800 kV motors in a True X configuration with 5136 props, because that's what I fly. So if you fly something similar, or you just want to try that, maybe you want to feel like what my quad feels like, if you want to try out what flying one of my Mantas feels like, then put these in your simulator, because that's about what it feels like. So I hope you enjoy them. I hope they've been helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have some different settings, or you found some different ways to tweak Velocidrone to make it feel realistic, or what your experience is with these settings, or finding your own settings. I'd really be interested to know. And again, if you haven't yet, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, I will catch you later.